All right, we are live. Welcome. This is Orion Rising. I am your host, Leonard O'Neill. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good morrow, depending on where in the world you are tuning into this show. All right, shut this out, shut this out, shut this out. It's Monday. It's a totally different day than I go live. But today I decided that we had to go live because I hadn't talked to a friend of mine in a while, and he and I started talking in the last few weeks, and said, you know what, we're going to have to go live and get on the air so we can talk. So I decided that's a great idea. Let's do that. And then I wasn't aware because he didn't actually just drop that to me, but he actually dropped his new book, his third book, on the 9th of this month. So I'm going to show you those links in a minute and get into all that. But the first thing I want to do is give you guys a little bit of background. Today I am live here and I don't have the cameras on yet on purpose because I am live here with Stephen Myers. Now I will turn the cameras on, and I wanted to say who it was before anybody went, oh, hey, I know who that is. I don't know why I do that, but sometimes I just do that. Right. So let me put the cameras on for us right here. Welcome to everybody who's out there. Share this out, share this out. Kari, welcome. Thank you for sharing that in the chat, Kari, into that group. Share that out, please, to Facebook. We are live on YouTube. We are live on two places on Facebook currently, and Stephen Myers was sharing out the link that I sent to him. So his friends and family and people will be able to see that. So welcome everybody, and welcome Stephen, my friend. He and I had posted, let me give you the run up of how he and I started talking again and really got into all this. I had posted a meme, one of those reels that I made, and it showed the pyramid, and it showed the flat earthers, and it was a website that was trying to disprove flat earthers, and it was the theory of the pyramids and how the king's chamber, the exhaust port, is whatever light, whatever, the hole in the roof was supposedly facing Orion. And flat earthers claim to base their whole entire theory on the other theory, which showed that Orion was there, and they claim the stars never moved. And the people that posted that proved that the stars did move. And Stephen said, you do realize that neither of those theories are accurate. And I said, that was kind of my point of how silly this is, because these guys were posting this thing saying they're wrong because here, let me show you how our theory is, and their theory is wrong too. Why is that? Steve says, because the port, that hole, faces the opposite direction from Orion. It's never faced Orion. And I said, man, we got to get on the air and talk about that. He goes, just let me know and we'll talk about whatever. So I do want to cover that for a minute, but truly, I'm going to bring up on the screen because this is very important. You guys need to see this. His books. Hold on, let me get over here. I'm on the wrong place to do so. I stole this from Stephen. Here's his 3 books. His newest one, you can see there on the screen. For those of you who are listening on the MP3 broadcast, you can't see them. So I'll put his first book was The Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramids. And this is Stephen Myers. His name is spelled Stevenmyers. And I tell you guys that because those of you out there listening on the MP3 broadcast, you can't see these visuals. Book number 2 is the Pyramid Prosperity Machine, Why the Great Pyramid Was Built. And his newest book, which just came out, it's on Kindle. I'll throw you guys up the link on the screen for you guys to take a look at if you guys want to go and get that. This is a long link, so you'll have to write it down. So is that the right place? Yes, that is. That's a link to Kindle, but you can go Amazon.com. You can look for the Stephen Myers books, and they'll come up on Amazon so you can take a look. It's on Kindle right now, and his new book is Pharaoh's Pump Analyzed. Okay, and so he examines the research by Edward J. and I'm not sure, is it Kunkel? Is that how he says his name?
Yes.
I knew that, I'm pretty sure, but I always say that wrong. Or I don't know why. I said there's some names that some people just say wrong. So if you guys are not familiar with Stephen Myers, which you would be insane if you are not, because he's the only voice of reason. Let me take that banner down. He's the only voice of reason on the planet when it comes to the pyramids, because we have Egypt, who in fact, their narrative is there was a pharaoh buried in it, and it was built by a pharaoh, and yet there's no empirical evidence of that. We'll get into that when Stephen's talking. And then you have the Ancient Aliens group who said that aliens came down and built the pyramids, and there is no empirical proof of that either. And everyone says, well, their theory is, well, we couldn't have done it the way they said. So it must have been aliens. But that's not exactly true. There is another theory of how the pyramids, and I've said this ever since I met Stephen Myers and talked to him the first time. There is another ideology that is provable that it could have been the way that the pyramids were built, and it's actually far more plausible than any other and reasonable ideology that that they used to use and imply and implore to do the large things back then. We'll get into that, but first I want to give you a little bit of background. Like I said on Stephen, he's literally has over 20 years. This is all from memory now. Over 20 years of experience in researching, and he's not somebody. I've never been to the pyramids, so I can't really claim anything. He's gone there. He leads expeditions there he leads people there to show them around, but he leads expeditions there to investigate. And I know you just went last year because we talked about that, but I want you to tell about that as well. I know I'm throwing everything at you. But guys, this is not a man who is sitting an armchair quarterback who is sitting somewhere in the United States and going, I got an idea how that thing happened. And he's never been there. The man has been there for more than 20 years. He has researched, and there's several pictures I was going to put up literally of him there, standing in front of the Sphinx, standing in front of the pyramids. There's one where he's pointing, and the pyramid is literally next to him. So you guys have to realize that this has been his life's work or a hobby, but he started foundations. He's done magazines. He's done interviews. He has documentaries. So it's not like this guy is a crackpot who's just making things up, because no one can disprove what he is saying. No one can say for empirically, okay, that's just not it. It was aliens. Or because if I'm Giorgio Tsoukalos, aliens, right? But no one can say that and give any kind of proof. And then the narrative that they're saying that it was built by a pharaoh for a pharaoh, there is no proof of that. And we'll let Stephen get into that as well. So I apologize for going on for 10 minutes in the beginning, Stephen. So welcome. And let's get into this and just hit the ground running. First of all, give them a little bit about your book, right? And then run right into the theories of why the investigation and what you contend. Let's go. Run it up.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Leonard. That's probably the most enthusiastic interview I've had in all of my 250 interviews. Since I've gotten started on this endeavor of trying to understand how the Great Pyramid was assembled and why they would go to such an effort. But you've already covered my 3 books pretty well. My newest one is they're all on Kindle. First 2 are also softcover, but you can find out the information and clickable links also from my website at thepump.org. That's
right. I have that. Let me put that up for them to look
at. But anyway, here we are, and thanks for having me back. I've been interviewed by you before, and having me back is kind of a vote of confidence.
Right. No, yeah. Thank you for agreeing to it and coming back. And it's been a while since I don't do very many interviews anymore where I'm interviewing people. I used to do 2 and 3 and 4 a week at a time. Now I don't do that. I'm teaching more, and so I don't do a lot. But when you said, hey, maybe we should talk on air, I was like, yeah. Yeah, most definitely. So let's get into one. A lot of people say let's go to that meme that I posted from that website that shows they claim that that exhaust port from the King's Chamber faced Orion at some point, and you're like, it's actually pointing the opposite direction, and how flat earthers tried to base their theory on how the earth is flat, and none of that's true, correct?
No, none of that's true, and they kind of disproved each other, if you will. But that
was the beauty of it. That's why I thought I have to post it. And you were the only one that caught that. When I posted, like, both those theories are wrong. I'm like, that was my point, bro.
Yeah, right. Well, a lot of lip service has been given to the vents of the King's Chamber and Queen's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, pointing to significant stars. But because of the precession of the equinoxes, those vents don't point to those stars anymore. They point to different stars. So there's quite a lot of variables associated with that idea. Every 72 years, the sky moves 1 degree, if you will.
Right.
And it's been quite a few years. So the vents point like 60 degrees away from Orion, that type of thing. So, that's the evidence.
Right. And that's the normal stellar drift.
Right. So
the
you
only
can
place I ever
interpret
saw
that by saying that the original builders wanted to make sure we knew that the Great Pyramid had nothing to do with the vents pointing to those stars, because they designed it in such a way that the vents don't point to those stars. So,
right. If they were trying to make sure we in the future knew that there was a correlation, they wouldn't have set it up to be a correlation at that moment, knowing they had to have known. Most people did. Even the Aztecs, right, and the Mayans with their calendar, they knew about stellar drift. So they would have realized that in the future, no one's going to make the correlation because they're not going to see it.
Right. But you can also say, well, because a lot of this stuff is just made up about these correlations. You can also say, well, the original builders wanted it to correlate to the stars during 2012 on the Mayan calendar.
Right.
And you just make that stuff up and then just say, well, that's what it is. Well, just because the stars may, that the Great Pyramid has vents that point up, everything in the world that points up points to a star. All hydroelectric dams have vents that point up to stars.
Right. But, it's not because it was designed that way. It's because there's stars up there.
Yeah. That doesn't mean that, everywhere in the sky is stars. Yeah. So anything that points up points to a star. So just saying because it points to a star doesn't validate that interpretation. So
right. Agreed.
100%. That's why that theory, the Orion correlation theory, is in crisis, because it's built on a lot of very flawed research methods.
Yeah. Well, that's just like, I think I said that in one of the chats where you and I were talking to one another. It's just like when you look at the tree ring theory and carbon dating. The truth is they cross pollinate. When you ask what is carbon dating based on, they say the tree ring theory. And when you ask what is the tree ring theory based on, they say carbon dating. And so I mean, we do get a good idea. That's probably a bad example. We do get a good idea of time distortion or radiation decrepitude or decay from that. But they're both based on each other. That's like the chicken and the egg, right? You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. They say that we know when the Great Pyramid was built because that's when the vents pointed to certain stars. But then they say, well, the vents pointed to those stars for some significant reason, but it's all a lot of mumbo jumbo, if you will. It's not very scientific. It's not based on scholarly research. A lot of correlations without causation, some circular arguments, if you will, and other issues. So,
well, and isn't that the same as what they claim the pyramid was built for? As a tomb, but there's no empirical. Pardon my language. There's no empirical evidence to show that any pharaoh was ever going to be, or anyone was ever going to be buried in that, or ever was. Isn't that correct?
Well, certainly there's no mummy found in the Great Pyramid, but Egyptologists say, because there's no evidence, that proves that it was a tomb. But Egyptology got its genesis, its start from tomb robbers. And if you're a tomb robber, everything you encounter is a tomb. If you're a hammer, everything in the world's a nail. So Egyptologists want to steal things out of tombs, and there was nothing in the Great Pyramid, no golden treasure. So Egyptologists say, that means the golden treasure was stolen a long time ago before us Egyptologists could steal it.
Before we could steal it, right? But they won't say those words, right? Yeah, because that's truly what they do. They go in and they steal it out, and then they go and put it on display for everybody. That's exactly what they do. They rob
for paying customers.
Yeah,
to look
right.
at. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
that's for us
true.
to
Yeah.
look at,
You,
and that's the truth about all of that, you know. And then you have people that are over there that are trying to promote tourism, and they're claiming that there was no, no pharaoh buried in there, and that in the king's chamber. And I know this to be false, but at the time I've never been there, so I couldn't say that. But I was told, well, and the tomb in there's not even built big enough for a human to be in, a tall man to be in. And I was like, really? And I believed it for a while. And then I saw a picture of you laying in it.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, one of the times I was in Egypt, I had to lay down in the coffer in the king's chamber, take a rest from all my strenuous researching. But a lot of people have done that. You know, a lot of tourists, even
Yeah.
Napoleon laid down in there, and it's
Right.
just
But the point
something to
was you
do.
fit and you're not 5'1".
No, I'm about what, 5'11" or so. You
Right.
can fit in there, but you can fit a person in a refrigerator box
Right. But
behind
yeah.
Sears. But
But
that
then
don't mean refrigerator
doesn't mean a
boxes.
refrigerator is a coffin. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So
Right.
just because something fits or whatever
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it's the two things are related.
Right, absolutely. Right, just because it's in that shape, and I think is that was why everyone said, well, that must have been a coffer, a cabinet that they were going to bury a body in with a, or a mummy. And I don't, no one knows what that thing was built for 100%, but you have a pretty good idea. So let's get into that. But before we do, I want to, for the people who have ever seen pictures of the pyramids, which I even have on my logo, and those are actual pictures. If you look at the pyramids, the way they are currently, everyone thinks that's what they always look like, and that's after they were robbed and stole of what I think 2 layers of the outside, because at the very top you see that smooth part that went down the entire pyramid, but then there was another layer on top of that, which was that very bright, was it limestone? I'm not even sure what it was. That was very bright, a stone that shined, basically reflected the sunlight, right?
Right. The Great Pyramid was covered with very high quality Tura limestone, and it was very beautiful, bright white stone. And but around 1000 AD, there was an earthquake which destroyed Cairo, and then they used that stone or the Great Pyramid as a quarry, if you will.
Yeah.
Took the quality stones from the Great Pyramid to help rebuild Cairo. So, yeah, they used to be much different than they are today. That's for darn sure.
Yeah. So my point of that is they were completely different. It was not something like a big step pyramid you could walk up, and it was very smooth. So if you couldn't get to the top of it, and if you did, you'd slide down and kill yourself going down. So the point of me saying that was that I think that when you talk about your theory as to what that was for, having that being whole, as it were, before they took all of the parts off of it to rebuild Cairo, would have lent a lot more in people's minds. That's why I started with that, prefaced it with that. Because if you imagine in your mind, the pyramid was completely smooth and very bright and beautiful, and then think, what's the function of that pyramid? And then you get into the idea that it was a water pump. If you're going to be pumping water and you're wanting the water to run to filter or just to get energized or just to be able to run downhill to then channel out to people to grow crops, to drink, and all of that, you would have to have it go first uphill or start uphill, unless you don't have an uphill, and then you have to have it run downhill. And the way it is now with the pyramids going like this, all that sandstone would just soak stuff up. So I think in people's minds, they're like, well, how could that even fit the way Mr. Myers is saying as a water pump? Because it didn't look like that when it was functional, correct?
No, it looked quite a bit different. Certainly, it's an unusual technology, the Great Pyramid, and we think that it was built using water locks and barges in a very systematic way.
And I want to get
Built,
into that too. I want you to explain
in a
that.
production line efficiency. That's what my first book is about: is how the Great Pyramid was assembled. But the Great Pyramid, all those passages and chambers, the complex arrangement inside the Great Pyramid was to be a water pump. There were sliding stones and stones on pivots that acted like valves and other features that indicate that it was a machine that provided a huge return on investment for the people that built it. So that's a good thing to think about. What I tell people is that at one time, when the Great Pyramid was built, there was no mystery about the Great Pyramid. Everyone knew and were certain how it was built because they were watching it being built.
They're watching it being built.
Everyone knew why it was built. The people that financed the construction project knew what they were doing, if you will, and poured riches into this construction project. No, there was no mystery at all about the Great Pyramid, just like there's no mystery about the Hoover Dam.
Right.
You know, people don't go there. They say it's magnificent. I've been there, but there's no mystery to it at all.
Yeah.
You know, it's it's infrastructure. So the duty and honor of modern day researchers is to understand what that common knowledge was that ancient people had, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Right, and I agree with that. When I was in college and I went to Philosophy 101, the monk who was teaching the class, the first thing he taught us, besides the word philosophy and the etymology of that, what it meant to the ancient Greeks, but the concept of learning about philosophical thought from the past, you had to, and this is what Stephen is talking about, you had to literally say, if I want to know what Socrates meant when he was talking about something, the only true way of doing that is to go, when did he live? Where did he live? What was going on in the world around him at the time? What motivated him to say what he's saying? And that's the only way you can figure out what he meant. Mm-hmm. So if you're that's Occam's razor. If you are an investigator, this is what Stephen's contention is. If you're an investigator and you're trying to figure out the pyramid, you can't look at it right now and go, well, this is what I think it is. Because that's what they're doing. They're like, this is what I think that was. But they're not looking at it when it was built, at the time, the technology they had, and the plausibility of, and then what is it for? Stephen Myers, my friends, is doing that and has been doing that since, that's like Robert Schoch. I don't know. I know you know who he is.
Oh, yeah.
But he's looking at things not from the standpoint of right now through eyes. He's trying to go back in time and see the pyramids, the whole entire Giza Plateau, and what was going on then. And then when he claims this is what I think happened, people are like, oh, he's just crazy. He's the only one like yourself who's looking at things from the perspective of what did it look like then and what was the technology and why would they even want this darn thing to be there, and coming up with other ideas. Am I right?
You are correct. And I've met him. He's a really sharp guy. And he is, a college professor and all of that, more degrees than a thermometer. But yeah, but that's true. But there is one
like you and he take a lot of heat because the academic, I do with my finger quotes, the mainstream tries to say you guys are these fringe guys with crazy ideas out on the outside edges. But the truth is they're just trying to make money.
Well, there's one constant way back when with the people and then and the people now. And that constant is people themselves. We all have people are the same way back when as they are now. People want prosperity, which means their kid is going to eat today and their kid is going to eat tomorrow. That's what prosperity is. They want leisure. They don't want to have a hoe and work 12 hours a day out in a subsistence farm and not have enough to eat. They don't want to do. They want some leisure and prosperity. And that's what that's why they built, I think, the Great Pyramid, was that it provided a working machine that was infrastructure that provided prosperity for the civilization that built it. That's why it's the Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine. Just like the Hoover Dam. The Hoover Dam, all it does is make electrons go through a wire. That's all it does.
Right.
But all of that is prosperity. You know, they irrigate year round with the Hoover Dam. They run these computers. And I'm in the Northwest Power Grid, so some of my electricity comes from the Hoover Dam.
Right.
And it's a magnificent thing. It pays, you know, dividends, huge return on investment. And that's what I think the Great Pyramid did.
Yeah.
It provided a huge return on investment with the water power, if you will, that it was able to provide by pumping water.
I agree with you. They knew far more about water and the power of water. And I didn't realize it as much until I saw you and some of the things that you were posting, which turned me on to, and I can't think of his name, the guy who was the father of in science of water. I have his book and I don't have it near me, so
Victor
I can't.
Schauberger.
Thank you, Victor Schauberger. You were the one. I don't remember if I ever told you this, but you were the one that pushed me on to that whole idea of theory of water, because the pyramids were built on an aquifer. That's an underground water system. For those of you who don't know, that's this basically, as I can tell it. Stephen would probably have a better idea. But the water that came underneath there churned in a certain specific way under the pyramid, that they purposefully made the water spin, because it charged the water with energy, and it also made the water purified and differences they understood. And then that water was then, of course, pumped up into the top and then out. And even if you don't believe that and you just say, oh, that's all a bunch of hooey, the truth is it was on an aquifer, and every theory that they have about that it was some sort of radiation thing or microwave thing or whatever is still based on the fact that it's built on top of an aquifer, and the water underneath is activating the pyramid. That's the only thing that everyone, except for the theory that it was for a pharaoh, that everyone can agree on. And so Stephen's got to be going, yeah.
That's true. Some of the excavations on the Giza Plateau are still flooded right now. So, you know, the groundwater and that type of thing. So certainly there's a profound link between the Great Pyramid and water. So it's, you know, an important link that needs to be explored in greater detail. But that's part of the direction of my research and understanding how the Great Pyramid functioned as a machine, providing a huge return on the expensive cost of building such a project.
Right. And now, and guys, you have to remember that. And this is why I brought up Robert Schoch, because he's the only person who, in a way, is validating Stephen Meyer's idea of a water pump. Because, and it's not Stephen Meyer's is not based on Robert Schoch's ideology, but Robert Schoch, looking into things, said, I believe that the pyramid sat in a green, lush place at one time, and then something happened and it became the desert. Why do I say that? Because if you're an entire society that's living in an area that is lush green rainforest, and then the climate changes and you find yourself in a desert with just a river quite a ways away from where all your people have been living, you now have to bring water to those people. Okay, so I believe that is what happened, because there's a lot of proof, that empirical proof, that science is now going, maybe it was a lush green forest area at one time and grassland. Okay, so then it turns into a desert. Now I'm the guy in charge of an entire culture, and we got to figure out how we're going to feed people. Okay,
right.
You're going to come up with ideas of what can we do to feed people so that we can bring the food to an area where water used to come to, and now it's sand in a desert. What can we do? And you have to come up with something. And sometimes, and this going back to Stephen's explanation, sometimes, like the Hoover Dam, you will literally build this entire huge dynamic structure because you need to, one, control the water that's going to the desert where people are living in LA, and two, bring them power. And literally, this is what I think is more plausible than, well, the aliens came here and just built it for no reason. They picked the middle of a desert and went plop. So there had to be a reason for it. But no one does anything on this earth And we wouldn't have built the Hoover Dam if we didn't need to control the water and to have hydroelectric so that we can have power. So, but we did. We needed that, and that's what we did. So that's one example of one dam, and they're all over the world that people did that to help feed their population. But yet people are saying that Stephen has a crazy idea that they might have built this big giant pyramid to make water so that the people could feed themselves, whenever that was, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, or whenever it was. And that's just a crazy idea, but we'd rather believe some little green men came from Mars, that they built it.
Right. Yeah. Dr. Robert Schoch, with his research about weathering on the Giza Plateau, indicates that the Sphinx was built much earlier, possibly 12,500 years ago.
Or further.
That tends to lend credence to the idea that the Great Pyramid may have been built earlier than Egyptologists say it was built.
Yeah.
And if that's true, then the vents won't point up to the stars that other people want them to point to.
Because the timeline would have been wrong by thousands of years.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables that make people reject that the Orion correlation theory, because of a lot of poor research methods to come up with these correlations without causation. So, right. The Great Pyramid was a big project, and it had a huge return on investment. It wasn't a death ray. It wasn't a tomb. The pharaoh had one carcass, but the Great Pyramid has several passages. So that doesn't seem to line up that way, and all of that. So, but it's
right now. Let's talk about that. And so, what Stephen is talking about is every other place, including Tutankhamun, which is the most famous because they have most of his relics, and they have it on a museum now that they built over there at the Giza Plateau. I've never been to it, but I hear that it's pretty intense. I've seen pictures. So, but the point is, most of the tombs didn't have like 3 and 4 chambers, and then you would go and find the king's burial chamber. Most of the time, it was a pretty direct route, sometimes a couple passages, but it was all one complex that led to that pharaoh or whoever king, whatever they were burying there. And literally, you have to look at, how did they normally do it? Like when you bury somebody underground, we dig down and we put their coffin in and we bury it over. It's a direct route. We don't have, unless you have a wife and kids buried next to them, we don't make this weird elaborate complex above ground. But even if we did, and we had a tomb, our tombs that we make have staircases that go down into the tomb. And guess what? There's where, and that's what most people do worldwide. Why then did this one tomb that never had anybody in it all of a sudden have all these passageways that go all over the place to different rooms, right?
Right. In the Valley of the Kings, there, a lot of evidence for tombs. They dug holes in the ground, and that's where they found King Tut and other mummies that were in the hole in the ground. But the Great Pyramid is very distinct in that it has a very complex interior. Ask an Egyptologist how the long open passages and doors on pivots protect a pharaoh's mummy and golden treasure, and you'll never get a coherent answer.
Right.
Egyptologists say, well, the people who built the Great Pyramid didn't know what they were doing, so there were several changes of plans during the construction, and that's why the tomb that don't look like a tomb actually is a tomb, but the builders didn't know what they were doing.
Right.
That's what Egyptologists say.
Right. So they knew to build this pyramid that's exactly the same dimensions all the way around, with this exact dimension going up like this at this exact angle, but on the inside they got lost and didn't.
They didn't have a clue there.
Didn't have a clue. Yeah.
But that's what makes it a tomb, because they changed plans. So there's a lot of ideas are under scholarly debate. It's nothing set in stone regarding the Great Pyramid, when it was built, or anything Egyptologists say, or other ideas that come and go, like the Great Pyramid was a granary. or the Great Pyramid somehow proves biblical prophecy. There's a lot of people that are into that.
Right.
There's Great Pyramid Bible correlations that they've made up and that type of thing. So,
Right.
we're in a
And if you
revolution
wanted
of
to do
ideas.
that, if they wanted to
And
do
I don't
that,
have
and
to
they
believe
wanted to
what they
say the
tell you.
pyramids tried to prove Bible prophecy,
Mhm.
I would say, because I know this, but most people in the world, I don't even know if you know about this. I know about this. I know that 7 clicks outside of Cairo, and I can't say what direction because I've been told by the governments to be quiet about it, but I'm going to still tell you this. 7 clicks outside of Cairo, people excavating, looking for other Egyptian things, ran across and found a Christian church that is now to date the oldest Christian church intact on the earth. I've seen pictures of it. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of it. And they were given to me by the people who were excavating this in 2017. And they said, we need to get this information out to the world before the Egyptian government finds out about it and takes control of the site because they won't let it be known to the world. Shortly thereafter, the Egyptian government found out about it and they arrested everybody that was excavating it and they confiscated all their photos. They contacted the American government because they found out that I had photos. The American government contacted me and confiscated my photos and told me not to tell anybody and to not show the photos to anyone. So all the photos are gone. So people can say I'm crazy now. But the truth is, it was beautiful. It was there. I've seen pictures of it. It was still full color, everything. And my point of that is, if the Egyptian government believed that the pyramids could sell tickets and more tickets to Christians around the world because they're claiming, if they believed that the theory is, hey, we can prove that it was talking about Bible prophecy, the first thing they would want to do is tell the world, oh, and by the way, we have 7 kilometers outside of Cairo, we have a church that's a Christian church that might be the oldest one still intact on the face of the earth, which shows that the Christians were in this area and maybe they knew about and were studying the idea that of Bible prophecy. Since you hear mum's the word and nothing about that, that should tell you that the pyramid does not in any way predict any Bible anything. Because the people whose their entire economy relies on tourism, most of it, they would be out there to the world saying, come see this Christian church and come on over to the pyramid and we'll talk about how those correlate. And they're not.
Well, Egyptology and the study of the Great Pyramid is not an open book. There's a lot of agenda. There's a lot of people that have written their PhDs, and anything that contradicts that is not allowed to be known to the public.
Right, because it's not part of the agenda that is their current moneymaker. Honestly, they did that. Anyone who knows anything about the academic world, guys, going back in time, you talk to any researcher in the field and they'll always tell you they don't want to know about this stuff. They didn't want to know about mummies for a long time in the United States. And the people who would say, hey, there's mummies down here, they were like, shut up about that. We don't want to know about that. Because it wasn't part of their agenda to make money. And like Stephen was saying, people writing books and teaching it and getting paid doctorates and getting paid because of their research when they know for a fact that they're trying to hide certain information because they don't want it to be told. It's not part of their agenda or narrative. And that's what's going on. I believe that.
Yeah, well, in the academic community, progress happens funeral by funeral. And they say in the academic community, they fight so viciously because the stakes are so low. They discovered the Piltdown skull. Oh, there it is. It's the missing link, the Piltdown skull over there in England.
Right.
And a whole generation of anthropologists wrote their dissertation on the Piltdown skull. Well, there's file marks on there, where somebody filed, on there to get the two pieces, the human skull and the baboon jaw, to fit together. And the experts didn't see that for 40 years. And it took 40 years for the Piltdown skull to be deemed a forgery, because that's how long it took for those people who wrote their dissertation to die off. But the next generation of anthropologists never did believe the Piltdown skull was valid. So nobody changed their minds.
Right.
And right now we're
You just
waiting.
had to wait for the guys in charge to die off. So the ones that had the power.
Yeah. So it takes like a generation for a new idea to become accepted.
Well, in the pretty example,
we're waiting for more Egyptologists to die off. That's a stagnated science, if you want to be so kind, that is in crisis because it doesn't use the scientific method. They don't demonstrate anything. They don't move heavy payloads up a ramp. They don't make a casing stone, those outside stones. They never made one of those in the way that they say it was done all day long. So it's a science that doesn't engage in the scientific method.
Well, that's just like, for an example of what Stephen is saying, the statues, the Rapa Nui statues on Easter Island, they claimed that they just moved them with ropes and put it in place and then buried it over. And people have tried to do it, and every time they've tried to do it, it's never worked out exactly the way they claimed that they thought it was, because when they talked to the people there, they said, how did those get in place? And they said they walked in place. So they assumed that meant that they were shifting them back and forth, and then a bunch of people pulling it, which is what they were trying to say about the pyramids being built, is that literally it was a bunch of people with ropes and a bunch of grease on the ground with pachyderms in front of them, and they were dragging them up this big giant in whatever ramp that they had. Even if they had a bunch of ramps doing kickbacks, what happens when they're turning around and going downhill? Do they have to have other downhill ones? Because now the second time they come up, the whole thing's greasy. So do they have to dry the whole thing off now and completely and then grease it back up as they move it? No one asked those questions. Stephen asked those questions and said, that's just not plausible. And so he looked for another way.
And then if it's a great big ramp that goes off into the distance, its volume is greater than the Great Pyramid itself. But they never provide any demonstrations of moving a 70-ton payload, which is about the weight of an Abrams A1 tank or a railroad locomotive.
Right.
Just take the wheels off a railroad locomotive, drag it up a ramp, and people like me will go back into the woodwork. But it's just unworkable. Their idea won't work in the real world. Imagine if there was a scientist who was a cow jump over the moonologist.
Yeah.
Talking about cows that jump on over the moon, and you can read about it in literature and about cow, and then somebody might say, hey, why don't you demonstrate a cow jumping over the moon? Shut up. Don't talk about demonstrations. And that's what Egyptology is. They won't demonstrate cows jumping over the moon, and they won't demonstrate all their ideas about how the Great Pyramid was built. They know how it was built. They just won't demonstrate
how. They can't prove it. Well, and then if someone says that literally, I think that aliens built the pyramids, Zahi Hawass, I don't know if he's still running the tours, but he would literally tell people, if you think that, you're effing stupid. Right? So he wouldn't even go near that theory. And then the same thing, if it wasn't a tomb, he would say the same thing. He would tell people, you're just stupid if you think that it's not a pharaoh's tomb, and you just need to shut up. And that's literally what Stephen is saying. That's their attitude, is just shut up about that. Never mind that now. Never mind that now. Look over here.
So, but it'd be nice if they had demonstrations. You can go to Colonial Williamsburg on the East Coast, and they talk about all the technology in colonial days, bookbinding, coppersmiths, carpentry, leather making, candle making, and they have reenactors demonstrating all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And then at Fort Clatsop on the West Coast, they have demonstrators, reenactors demonstrating the Lewis and Clark's fort, how the fort was made, how they used guns, how they made candles, how they extracted salt from seawater, and all of that. It's all demonstrated. But then you get to Egyptology, and they have these like illustrations and stories that they tell. They know exactly how it was built, but they can't demonstrate any of it. I know how a cow jumped over the moon. I can't demonstrate it.
Right. Can't
You
demonstrate
get
it.
my drift? I mean, it's a science that's in crisis. I don't know anyone over the 8th grade who believes that precision stone cutting was accomplished by using hand tools.
Right.
No, it can't be done. Chip, chip,
Can't
chip,
be
chip,
done.
chip, 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 chip,
Yeah.
and then it's a precise surface.
Yeah. Literally, you can take a square. I've seen them, and they would put them on the block, and they would look for any kind of striation. If it was hand done, it is virtually impossible to have it that smooth
it can't be
completely.
done. Yeah.
Now, but people say, well, they made statues, and statues were that way, and that's because they would sand down the statues to make them smooth. Anybody who ever talked to somebody who was a statue maker, or some sort of cobbler, or I use the term cobbler, but then that's building shoes. But I was thinking cobblestones. But any kind of mason, Freemason, they'll tell you it's not the same. It's not what you think. They always show the same thing. They're just going tink, 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 and it's perfect. That's just not the case. They have to do other things. You ever see somebody work with clay? They're doing the same thing, and they got to sit there and smooth it all out. So I don't think that they had these teams of people that were so good that literally they had to have millions of slaves or millions of people working, migrant workers that were Jews that came from a different place, right? That volunteered to be there because of work. And all of them had to be so good that they could all carve within a fraction, a hundredth or a thousandth of an inch on every single piece that they cut.
Right.
That is, we can't do that with machines.
Yeah, well, you can't. Yeah, it's certainly not demonstratable, and Egyptology is just wrong. They've gotten away with it for so long. Egyptology is the richest science in the world, believe it or not, with all of their museum space and priceless artifacts, and yet they can't make a single casing stone like we talked about earlier that was on the outside of the Great Pyramid. They can't make a single surface of a casing stone. So it's never been done in the method that they say it was done. Certainly I think that there was a lot of mechanization with building the Great Pyramid.
I agree.
There's
very few that talk about the big giant wheel saws that were there. I think it's far more plausible that they had these big giant
people with strong back muscles. They had few people and some machines. Just like when you go into a machine shop, they have a lot of machines and a few people, and they produce, precision cutting. But you just can't, and you can't talk to Egyptologists. It's a stagnated science that has turned into a mystery religion that has tenets instead of demonstrations. So, but pretty soon it'll go away, and it's happened before. Phrenology was a science about the correlations between the bumps on a person's head and their character traits. And you've all seen those porcelains, heads with the markings of different character traits. And that was taught in college, books on phrenology. And then all of a sudden it went away because it couldn't withstand the rigors of the scientific method. People made up a bunch of correlations, and then it went bye-bye, and not very long ago.
But they made a lot of money. They printed books, and then it was taught in colleges, so they accepted it until eventually it couldn't be stand up anymore to scrutiny, and then it went away.
Yeah, it was wrong, and that's what's happening to both the Orion correlation theory and also Egyptology is in crisis right now. And
the same thing goes with physicists. For 40 years, there was an idea that some of, if not all of, the known universe was in fact an illusion and more AI-like. And no one wanted to believe it until our AI technology hit a certain level. And then science went, that's weird because we're getting the idea now that it's 40 years after somebody brought it up originally, 40 years of people learning about it. And now science is starting to go, there might be more to AI in the universe than we first thought. And gravity is one of those things. They didn't know what it was. And they were like, well, there must be this molten coal core that's molten and it's got to be made of copper. So it has to be perfect. It has to be the Goldilocks zone. And that's what's generating electricity that is causing gravity. And now they're going, okay, so maybe it wasn't that at all, but they finally admit we have no idea. There's, again, is the same ideology where originally for all of time, it was thought one way until people started looking at it differently. But then again, it took those guys to age out and die for the new ideas to start taking hold.
Right. Yeah. Oftentimes science is the last ones to know what the heck's going on. So just because somebody said something or somebody read a book that about correlations doesn't make it so.
Right.
And we're in a revolution of ideas on many fronts. And the best way to participate in the revolution is to read books. That's what it looks like. Not just believing what somebody says, or 20 years ago you read a book about what Egyptologists say or what about correlations, and then just believe it until you die. Then you're kind of more in the way than progressing.
Right. No, I agree. And I think that's the biggest problem that people have. I teach this. I tell people, and it's a line from Star Wars, as a matter of fact, that Obi-Wan Kenobi, when he was deceased, told Luke Skywalker in, it was either the second movie or the third one. So it was either Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. And it doesn't matter which one, but he literally says to Luke, you're going to realize that all the truths we cling to are greatly determined by a certain point of view, or depend greatly on a certain point of view. And Luke's response is a certain point of view, and he gets annoyed. He doesn't go into details, but that certain point of view is yours. That's the problem, is that when people learn something, they say, well, that must be the truth. And then some people are dead set and they'll believe that their entire lives, and they won't allow anything to change their minds. And that's a lot of what's going on. People are making money off of it. So therefore they don't want it to change. Right.
True. Well, the brain is sort of like a computer, but a computer, you can erase data and put in new data. But a person's mind, that's the hardest thing in the world to do, is to reject something that you think is true and accept something that is more true. And people have these ideas about correlations and all of that, and that's fine, or about the Great Pyramid and Bible correlations or star correlations. But if they want it to be science, then it has to withstand the rigors of the scientific method. They have to use scholarly technique to conduct their research. But if it's just a religion or something, then that's something else. So I do oftentimes try to discuss the research methods used by the Orion correlation theory, and oftentimes it's a difficult subject to discuss. Yes. Because of just how flawed that theory is. On my YouTube channel that you can get to from our website at thepump.org, there's some videos about the flawed research methods of the Orion correlation theory, and about questions that people that believe that theory won't ask, especially if that won't answer, because those questions address research methods. So I've got a couple of videos that will help people get started on understanding the flaws of those correlation theories associated with the Great Pyramid.
And people should take a look at that. One of my biggest issues when it comes to the ancient alien theory, and I created Ancient Aliens Worldwide, the group, but one of my contentions there is that the entire ideology that they're pushing, and that Georgios Tsoukalos is pushing, has to do with going back to the Dead Sea Scrolls and the scrolls from Mesopotamia, and Zecharia Sitchin in 1948 trying to teach himself how to read the cuneiform language of the Mesopotamians, and he runs across this word Anunnaki. And he sees the first part that says Anu, and he says, well, the Akkadians who live next door, the Greeks, have a god called Anu, so the Mesopotamians must have been talking about the god Anu here. And then he skips over the next word in the phrase that's Na, and goes to the word Ki and says, I think that means the god Anu came down to earth. And then you come forward in time, which is wrong, by the way, but you come forward in time to 2012, and Georgios Tsoukalos now takes that translation of the god Anu came from space to earth, and now it says those from the heavens. Now it's an entire species. Those from the heavens came to earth. So now that whole word Anunnaki, 3 words, becomes one whole word and is now an entire species. And all of this, they don't want to change. Why? Because their entire theory is based on the only proof they have is the Dead Sea Scroll that Sitchin translated, and that they warped the translation of into an entire species to make all of their theories say they built the pyramids and the aliens came here. And there's no other proof, but there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of things that lead to the idea that maybe somebody came from outer space, but we still don't know. But that's just like the pyramids when they're like, we know how it was built, but we can't prove it. And literally the scholars today said that the words were supposed to be Anuna, Ki. And when you have the word Anuna, it doesn't mean the god Anu, it means the prince. So royalty came to town and taught everybody how to plant crops, and agriculture has nothing to do with aliens whatsoever. That wasn't, and that's still been proven by the scholars who now understand the language. But like Stephen's plight, he learned the language of Egypt and has this idea of, and we'll get more into that and the pump system and his new book. But it's taking all this time because he has to wait now for everybody, the theorists, to hit a brick wall long enough and die off before anyone's going to pay attention, because it's part of the narrative that makes them money, right?
Well, that's true. And I look at it a little differently about the ancient aliens idea. I've coined a word that you'll probably like. It's alien-centric, sort of like ethnocentric. You judge things by us. We judge other cultures based on us.
Yep.
Well, alien-centric, which is you judge everything about aliens. But also, if you say, well, the aliens came all the way from Alpha Centauri to the Earth, and then they, for some reason, had to stack rocks up into a pile.
Right.
To get home.
Right. They had all this technology, but yet when they got here, they could only stack up a bunch of rocks.
Yeah, they couldn't find their way home until they stacked these rocks up into a pile. But also, here's another flip side of that same coin. Yeah, aliens built the Great Pyramid, which means the people that lived back in that time, they were stupid. They're stupid people that couldn't do it. They weren't geniuses like I think they were. They were dumb, and they didn't really know. They couldn't do anything, even though it's
they're all wearing loincloths, and they were a bunch of children afraid of the stars.
Yeah, they were afraid of their own shadow, and all they knew is
couldn't even make fire, just cavemen.
Have a stick and dig it in the ground. They're stupid people.
Yeah.
The people that lived back then are stupid, and then aliens had to come and build the Great Pyramid.
And show them how to do everything else.
Very well with me. I think that in contrast to that in ancient times there were geniuses. Geniuses in transportation, geniuses who understood water, geniuses who were like either Victor Schauberger or Tesla or others. Yep. And those geniuses had a wise leader, and that wise leader had them build this huge, expensive project, but it had a big return on investment. It wasn't just a big tombstone. So I don't like the ancient alien idea very much.
I agree with you, because they're doing exactly that, and literally going back to, and this is why I think this way, going back to the introduction to philosophy when I was in college in '91, literally was the same thing. To get to know these people, you have to go back in time and get into their head and understand what it was like and who they were. And when you do that, you realize that, and instead of looking at things from our point of view, and that's what the contention was to Luke Skywalker, because everyone does exactly what you're talking about. We look back in time and we go, well, because we have computers and things made of steel and they didn't, they must be stupid. And the truth is the way that they lived back then was far more efficient than the way we live now, building houses out of trees and driving cars made of metal. And it was actually cheaper, more efficient, more cost effective. And oh yeah, okay, so they couldn't fly around the world in 12 hours, but the truth is they could build empires far easier than we can now. And
Yeah.
their footprint is still here. And they've proven with documentaries that if we literally stopped being right now, that in 20, maybe 30 years, there would be no evidence of us even being here.
Yeah, pretty
Hardly
much.
any at all.
Our civilization would decay pretty quick.
Yeah.
But I have a pretty high regard for ancient people, that they
Yes.
were geniuses.
Agreed.
And
I do too.
were able to complete massive construction projects, and build dams, roads, highways, commerce, medicine, culture. So
Yeah. I mean, the truth is, look at the guys, right? Guys out there, think about this now, what Stephen is saying. Look at Socrates, Aristotle, right? Just to name a few. Look at, like, we're talking about Victor Schauberger. That was when did he do that? Wasn't it in the 1800s or early 1900s? So think about the technology that we had then. Emerson and his ideology, as far back, go even further back to ancient times. Look at Lao Tzu, who was in 634 BCE, and his teachings are wise today. So we're talking over 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. That man said something that is still blowing people's freaking minds today. And at the same time, the Buddha was talking. So if you look back, I agree with you. If you look back in time, the only thing that you said this earlier on, that humans are the same now as they were then. The only difference is our technology, that the road that we went down, the angle we went down for our technology in this time period is different than the angle they went down for technology. But that does not mean those people were stupid at all. I agree with Stephen. I agree with you, brother. I think that they were geniuses, just like there are geniuses today, and maybe even more so back then because they had more time. They weren't preoccupied with television, movies, the internet. They had time. They had nothing but time to think stuff up, figure things out.
They were geniuses, so they don't need aliens. Some people say, well, the ancient peoples, they could have built the Great Pyramid, but it was aliens, and you can't have it both ways.
Right. So, I've done many videos where I put together with Giorgio Tsoukalos and memes of him going, I didn't hear your question, but the answer is aliens.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that is funny. So yeah, he's
a good guy. I've talked to him, I've met him. He's a good guy, but the truth is the narrative that he's pushing is very draconian in ideology. It's very short-minded and profit driven. You know what I mean? All of them are that way.
I do agree with your idea about traveling to like where Socrates was, and certainly I study the Great Pyramid. So last year in October, I led a 13-day tour back to Egypt, and we went to a whole bunch of different sites, including the Great Pyramid. So I co-led that with Ramona Miles. She actually now lives in Egypt. So she's a great person. Her website is lifealongthenile.com. So she is a sharp lady, and we had a great tour. Went and seen the whole thing, that hieroglyph of the light bulb and the melted steps. We saw that.
I love that. I love that because people don't want to believe that was a light bulb, but you and I know, just looking at it, if you have any idea of our technology today and you look at that, it's obvious that's a light bulb, man.
Yeah, it's very strange hieroglyph. I was right there. I touched it and everything, and but you can't just say, oh, it's a lotus flower or whatever. They were trying to communicate something that seemed rather complex. Yes. So and the Baghdad battery is back in,
Baghdad battery. And you know what? We teach that to kids. Some people don't remember this. I don't know if they do it now, but when I was in school, when you were in school, I'm pretty sure because we were taught that literally with a potato, And yeah, you can just stick diodes in it, and literally
Yeah.
it gives off electricity because of the acid that's in it. And orange juice is what they were showing in the Baghdad battery with a copper core, orange juice, and hooking up a couple of wires, filaments. I literally today I make colloidal silver. And the method that I use to make that is the same method that the Egyptians used, where literally you take the two pieces of silver and you dip them in water, and then you hook up a 9-volt battery. And what was the Baghdad battery? Wasn't it 7.8? And our 9-volt is 9 volts. So they were literally like a 9-volt battery, guys, just a little bit less. And you could daisy chain those. We know how to do that, where you can link them, make them stronger. And I do that with 9-volt batteries. I daisy chain the 9-volt batteries, and I touch the wires to the silver, and the silver, it electrifies the silver, and it actually leaches silver into the water, and it's colloidal silver water. That is the method that is 5,000 years old from Egypt. Okay, right. So it works. So it wasn't like someone invented it and they went, well, that's not provable. And I also make ormus the same way when they called it Cleopatra's milk. So they were making this stuff thousands of years ago. And now I can charge $40 an ounce for either one of those because it's that valuable today. And it's a method that the Egyptians used. My point of this is what Stephen's point is that they weren't as dumb as people try to say they are, and that they needed aliens to come down to teach them how to make civilizations because they were already doing it. Oh, no, they only got that information because the aliens taught them. They weren't doing it before that. So then the question is, when did they get there? When did the aliens get there? Never mind that now. Never mind that now. Isn't that a beautiful name? When did they get taught that? Exactly. Show me the time when it all started. And they can't. They just keep going back further, and then they just go, never mind that. They were here at some point. But I've researched it forever. I just haven't gone to these places. So when you guys went on last year, how many places did you go to? Did you go to like Luxor and things like that?
Yeah, we went to certainly the Giza Plateau. We went to Luxor and Karnak, and we had a 4-day boat ride along the Nile, and it was marvelous. And went to a whole bunch of other sites that and temples. And we got to talk to, regular people, and the Egyptian people are wonderful, very accommodating to tourists. They have been since Herodotus went to Egypt in the 5th century BC.
Right.
So it was wonderful. And
so can people go to that? What was the website of that woman you were talking about? Can they go there and find tickets or packages that they can put together if they want to go on a trip?
Yeah, I'd highly recommend it. Ramona Miles, lifealongthenile.com. And she has tours every so often. She also does some teachings of various subjects. So she's now lives in Egypt. So she's a really good one. I would co-lead a tour with her again. And
hopefully maybe you can do that, coming up. And if you do, let us know about it and I'll help you promote that. Because I've been trying to work for years with the people of Egypt, many people there. That's how come those guys sent me those pictures, because I had tried to help promote people going to these places. I've never been, and I plan to go and tour the world and go to many different places, like over in the Philippines, like with Bruce Cunningham is working with all the guys over there, with the what's his name, Yuvanov, the Russian Yuvanov, who Valerie, who's helping with all of his stuff, and he's realizes that the pyramids have energy in their shapes, and so he's working that angle, but he still doesn't say it was aliens. He still to this day, even though he says this stuff, is saying the Egyptians built this and they understood how things worked more than people realize it. And every time I've ever talked to that man, he's never said aliens built the pyramids. He does the same thing you do. He's like, those people knew what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, they did. The people's wants, needs, and desires are the same now as they were then, and also the laws of physics are the same. So there's still gravity, there's still water, still buoyancy, and that type of thing. So on our video we have a video series on how the Great Pyramid was built, about 14 short videos, and also a video series on how the Great Pyramid pumped water. So it goes into excruciating detail.
No, the links to that on your website again?
At thepump.org. So,
at
yeah.
thepump.org.
So there's
okay,
a
let me
lot,
put that back up on the screen again.
lot
for
more
you guys.
detailed information than we're getting at. So, but it's been fun. I mean, I've met a lot of people. I'm just a humble researcher and book author, and that going to Egypt was magnificent. Once you get there, the airfare is a little bit expensive.
Yeah,
but it's quite inexpensive in Egypt. And
if you're an American, your dollar, or European with euro, your dollar goes a lot further in Egypt than it does wherever you're at on the planet. So Stephen's right. I've never been there, but I know that
we had some deluxe meals, some very fancy hotel rooms, and treated like kings with the transportation and the guides and everything. It is a trip of a lifetime. I wouldn't recommend anybody going into debt for anything else, but Egypt is such a bucket list item that
it is for me. It is. There's many places on that I'm planning to tour. Right now, I'm taking care of my mother. I'm her caregiver. She has Alzheimer's, so there'll be a point when she's going to have be in a home, and once that happens, I'll be free to travel the world, and I'm already making plans to do so. I'm hoping to be able to go over there, and who knows, maybe it'll be one of those times where you and I can show up over in Egypt at the same time while you're leading a group of people, and I could be in the group like a tourist following you around.
Oh, wouldn't that be fun? Yeah, I'd like that. So you never know what's going to happen in the future. So
well, I have plans. We're making plans to be going around the world and talking and teaching people. And opening their minds more to ideas like this. So don't be surprised if I contact you in the future and say, Stephen, we'd love to have you on to talk about this again, to teach people, because we're trying to open people's minds to the idea that we humans didn't need and don't need aliens to ascend to all of these great structures in the world that we've made throughout time. And I believe that we're capable in the past and now and in the future, because of the motivation is always the same. Just like you said, people want prosperity. And the only way that you can get that is sometimes to change the climate that you're in by doing specific things that might be a very big endeavor that costs a lot of money. But some people at some point say, to save our society, we need to do this. Hoover Dam for the 3 or 4 states out west from that, California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and Arizona, from just that area right there, gets money, power. I've been there. I literally have a sticker that says, I ate a damn dog. I had a damn dog, because I had to eat one of those hot dogs, and I stood at the middle of the dam and was like, Arizona, California, Arizona, California. So
I have too. That's
you got to do it, right? That's one of those things, right?
Right. Not to dwell on the Hoover Dam, but it's like an industrial cathedral, if you will.
Yeah.
Built in ancient times. The 1930s are pretty ancient. If you talk to my grandkids,
almost 100 years ago now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it's just sitting there. Made Las Vegas possible, if you will.
Yes.
With all that electricity and everything. My favorite dam is the Grand Coulee Dam in Washington State on the Columbia River, and it 2 weeks of it running, the money they make pays for the dam itself, the operation of the dam, for a whole year. So that's a pretty good return on investment, and the rest is clear profit. So they provide huge amounts of electricity, and so prosperity. But the same with the power grid, the same with the sewer. Every town has a sewer system. It's infrastructure that provides, you wouldn't believe it, but it does provide prosperity, the sewer system.
Sure does.
Yeah,
Sure
wait
does.
till
You
you
don't
get.
believe that, guys. Look back in time at New York City prior to them building just New York City, but you can look anywhere in the world when they used to just pour the crap, the pee and the poo out windows and had it running down the middle of the street. That's what it used to do, guys. And people were walking around in it all the time. And look how many people were dying of diseases. And then when they put it all
Right.
underground and piping, how all of a sudden all these cities took off and the disease level went down to, like 400% less just by changing one little thing.
Right. So it's all infrastructure that we're inundated with and we take for granted. But that's why everyone you see has a nice big belly and everything. Is we
Right.
have some leisure, prosperity, and that type of thing
That's true.
based on these types of infrastructure.
Yep.
The phone
Thinking
system, the
about
internet is infrastructure. So that's what I think the Great Pyramid was not.
No, I agree,
not
and I want to get into that more. Let's talk about your new book. We showed the picture, mentioned it, but you didn't talk about it. I'll put the picture up on the screen.
Okay, yeah.
I have a picture of it here for people to look at. Here's this new book, and that is Pharaoh's Pump Analyzed.
Yeah.
And Stephen is examining the research of Edward J. Kunkel.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk about that. I want you to talk about that. What was the research? And
Okay.
book, tell us a little bit about that without giving away too much because you want people to read it.
Okay, on my third book, it analyzes essentially another book called Pharaoh's Pump, written by Edward J. Kunkel. And he's the
Hold on,
guy
let me
that
put you
got
up on
this
full screen so they
started.
can see it. Put that back up again, please. There you go.
Pharaoh's Pump by Edward J. Kunkel. And he talked about the Great Pyramid. He didn't talk about gods. He didn't talk about aliens. He didn't talk about what the Pharaoh wore, what type of hat he wore. Didn't talk about their language. He talked about the Great Pyramid as a construction project. How, it is direct physical evidence that indicates how it was built. And he came to the idea that it was water locks and barges, and that the Great Pyramid was a water pump. He's the one guy in the whole universe that came up with that idea. Originally published his book in 1962, privately published. He was fighting an uphill battle against the established,
the establishment.
Sciences. And anyway, my third book, Pharaoh's Pump analyzes Kunkel's book and his research. So it's a little bit more scholarly, and Kunkel's book has a lot of illustrations, and it talks about him. And here's some pictures, and how he came to understand about the Great Pyramid and his research, and kind of clarifies some issues with his book, and also talks about how since he first published his book, how his direction of research has been, advanced and improved over the years. 1962 to now is what, 50 years?
50 years, almost 60 years.
Yeah, so it's been a long time. It's funny, his book's been out that long, but people, haven't even heard about it. So I'm trying to help get the word out. His book was privately published, before Amazon, and had a limited distribution. But my book analyzes his book, and I think it was an important work to do.
Agreed.
And hopefully people can read it. It's on.
All right. So let's talk about that. You and I did an entire episode talking about that theory of the pumps or the locks to build, including the showing that they had literally brought the Nile River almost to the doorstep, or literally to the doorstep of the Giza Plateau, so that they could move on barges all of these giant stones. Explain to people the theory of the lock system and how that would have worked to build the pyramid the way it sits today.
Well, we think the Great Pyramid was built level by level, including the casing stones. And the first stone set in place was the casing stones of the first level. So it would be a square wall, And those stones are bonded together watertight with a bonding agent of some sort, very strong, stronger
Right.
than the stone itself.
Yeah.
And they were able to fill that pond with water. And they also had water locks, like in the Erie Canal, from the Nile River all the way up to the building site. So once they had that pond full and kept it full, they were able to bring stones on barges systematically up to that pond, and they would move the stone off the barge down into the pond. And when the pond was filled with stones, the interior stones, the first level of the Great Pyramid was completed. No strong back muscles required. And
Right.
then they placed the next layer of casing stones around, and it's another higher square wall.
Yeah.
And they added additional water, which kept that pond higher at the second level. And
Yeah.
they added another water lock to get to that level.
So they would literally have a lock. They would sail into it, fill it up with water, just like at the canals, like he was saying, the Panama Canal and the Erie Canal. And then they would sail over to the next level.
Yeah.
And then they would just do the same thing. They would just close the gate and then raise them up to the next level. And I've seen pictures. I think you had them on your site or something or somewhere when you and I were talking over the years. And you have to realize these barges, when people say barges, you think about these barges that we have today, but you don't realize that underwater, a barge is not really deep like this. A barge is very shallow. So
Yeah,
literally, if they were building that stone, it didn't need to be deep for them. So couldn't somebody stand in that water next to the barge because it didn't need to be that far into the water, right?
Yeah, the each pond was about 4.5 feet deep, about the height of the tallest casing stones. The Erie Canal, when first built, was 4.5 feet deep, and the barges had a capacity of 70 tons. Isn't that interesting? So,
yeah, right.
So if in the 1830s they went to all the effort to build the Erie Canal, which was the most expensive infrastructure built in the New World up until that time, and they went to all that trouble so they could move payload after payload effortlessly. And that's one reason why New York City is so huge, is that it was part of that one end, in effect, of the Erie Canal.
Yep.
And all the commerce that went on. So it was.
They did the same thing, because guys, you have to realize that to get to, if you were in New York and you wanted to sail, because you couldn't go across land because it would take forever. And early on, that was wild country. So you had to sail all the way down around the Horn, the Cape of what did they call that? The Cape of Good Hope, the Horn of South America, and sail all the way back up just to get to San Francisco or Los Angeles or San Diego. Right. So to change that, they did the same thing in Panama. They made this lock system in Panama so that you could just sail there, go through the lock system, and the Atlantic Ocean is higher up than the Pacific Ocean. So you would just go in and drop down each lock system until you got to the Pacific Ocean, and it would save you a month of sailing to get back over to the west coast of the United States, until the railroad system helps put things through, but it was still faster. So imagine back then in the technology that they had to build the Erie Canal and why, to build the Panama Canal and why, and the amount of money they spent on that, and the return for their investment is what Stephen was talking about. And why he was bringing that up is because the same thing is that why would they build this entire huge thing? Because they were trying to feed a nation of people. Yeah. And those people needed water to irrigate the fields to feed all of these people. Otherwise, they're all going to have to move and live right next to the water, which flooded every year. So they couldn't live really, really on the water. So they had to bring water to the people. And there was a lot of people living in Egypt, and the climate changed very drastically, very quickly, and their survival depended on it. And they came up with an idea. I believe that is the most realistic idea for the pyramid of anything I've ever heard in my entire life. It makes far more sense to me. And that's why I love to have Stephen on. Because
I appreciate that. I've had a lot of people say, hey, they had the Nile River right there. The Nile River is right there. They don't need a pump. But in the real world, I live I live in a rural part of Oregon,
Right.
and there's rivers, but every farm is connected to the river, and they have an irrigation pump. Just having water in the river is worthless to irrigate your land. You need to get the water up from the river into the land.
That's right.
So it's
And that's a lot
what people
harder,
say.
guys. For us today, we just hook a motor up to it and pump it uphill. They
Yeah,
didn't have machinery to pump things uphill as easily back then. So they had to come up with another idea to pump
right,
things uphill. Yeah.
right. And then in modern times, they came up with the High Aswan Dam, the largest structure in the valley of the Nile. And a lot of its electricity is used for year-round irrigation.
Yeah.
Why do they irrigate year-round when the Nile flooded every year? So why would they do such a thing? So it's just it's
Because
funny.
prosperity begets prosperity, and it also begets more, because what happens is when you're prosperous by the Nile's natural flow, ebb and flow, pretty soon you have more people than you can feed. And now you have to figure out how you're going to make more food, because the Nile will only provide so much for everyone. And then there's not enough. So they
Right.
had to literally come up with ideas. If you look at over here in the United States, or not the United States, but the North America, Central America, and South American continent, you'll find the same thing where people would literally dam up a river uphill, and then they built these step platforms that they could let the water irrigate and run down the side of the
Right.
mountain to
Mhm.
these different levels, and they would plant crops in those different levels. They literally just took the terrain and said, we could use the terrain and that river up there, or we could just leave it coming down here, and it only fed us down here for a little bit, but now we're too big. How do we fix that? So they stopped the water to flow down there and controlled the water and utilize that water to control that water so they could feed their people. We do it here in the United States. Look at Mexico or New Mexico, look at Arizona, look at Texas, and look what they do with their water system. Every drop of water that rains during the monsoon season is irrigated into catch basins, because they don't get any more water for the rest of the year, and they need to feed all their people and grow their crops. I lived in Arizona. I know what I'm talking about. So we did that just here. Why is it so hard for people to get the idea that the pyramid was designed to irrigate so people could grow crops so they could feed their people? Why is that so
Yeah.
impossible for people?
Yeah.
Aliens.
Yeah, it's a stumbling block for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But when they built the High Aswan Dam, they stopped the yearly inundation. So the dam and the benefits it provided was greater than what was provided by the yearly
Naturally when it
inundation. And
flooded or
people
whatever.
say, well, it's Egypt. They don't need water pumps. Well, the largest water pump in the world is in Egypt. It's called the Mubarak Pumping Station. It's built for this project called the New Valley Project. They're pumping water up into this other depression that is they're going to expand irrigation, farmland, and everything else. So people can word search Mubarak Pumping Station after their former leader and see that the largest water pump in the world is in Egypt currently.
Because they need to expand their irrigation so they can grow new crops, because they have more people that are expanding in the area and have a need to feed people.
Right.
Correct?
That's correct. It will expensive project to build. $500 million. With a B. So
With a B.
they're going to get that money back somehow, and that is through the increased irrigation, crop production, and other benefits. So it's fascinating. People say, "Oh no, they don't need any of that," but in the real world, they actually do need all that, just like everywhere else. So in modern times, Egypt needs a big water pump. In ancient times,
Egypt
in
needed a big
the
water
valley
pump.
of the Nile, they needed a big water pump. And so one of our goals of our foundation is to redevelop that ancient high technology to help our modern but very troubled world. And that's why I established this nonprofit foundation that people can go to our website, find out our goals, our activities, upcoming events, and that type of thing. People can become involved if they want to, or donate materials. We have a research facility that we are equipping and that type of thing. So if they want to become involved or see what we're about, they can go to our website.
Right. And that, let me put that back up on the screen again for people to see at thepump.org. Right. So I would say, yeah, definitely take a look at that, guys, because when you really take a look at the world from the standpoint of being an adult and someone who is a free thinker, you start to come to different conclusions than the narrative that they're teaching. And you have to ask yourself, why is it that they don't want us to know what really went on in history? Why do they want us to know something completely different? And the reason for that has to do exactly with what Stephen and I were talking about, because certain people that are making a lot of money off of writing their theses and their theories and teaching and getting tenures in colleges and around the world, they're all getting paid a lot of money to keep things a status quo the way they want it to be, not the way it truly is. They don't care. I think a lot of them, I can't say all because it's never all, because they're, like Stephen said, there's people like him in science, in physics, in history around the world that have to wait for certain people to die of old age before they'll be allowed to change the narrative or prove it, because you have these people that will just stifle the narrative because it doesn't fit into what they're currently making a lot of money off of. Am I right?
You are right, and it's a sad story, but that's the way it works. Even penicillin, it has suffered a huge resistance from the medical community. They said, "Oh, we don't need it. We've never needed penicillin.
Right.
We're fine." Or they said, "Well, it's too expensive to make," or other objections. They also said, well, the guy that figured out penicillin wasn't a medical doctor; he was a botanist.
Yeah.
So how can it be true?
Yeah, he
Because
can't know what he's talking about. Yeah.
if he was a doctor, maybe we would consider it. But
Yeah.
since he's not a doctor, he can't make any type of advancements in the medical community.
Right.
So there was all of that. There was a huge resistance to penicillin.
Yeah.
And then finally, its value was greater than the resistance against it, and it finally was accepted.
Because there was money to be made from it. That's the unfortunate thing, that is literally the motivational factor. Necessity is the mother of invention, but the truth is that something being applied to a culture, for whether it's for benefit or the good of the all, is not the motivational factor to do so. It's only monetary gain, unfortunately. That's where we are. I mean, look at, people have a tendency to get scared about things. If you look at the steam engine, when they came up with steam-powered paddle boats up and down the Mississippi, nobody wanted to ride on them because they just knew they were going to blow up and kill everybody. If you look at in the 1890s, when people were inventing the automobile, people were afraid to ride in them because, this is the truth, you can look this up, they believed that if the human being were to travel more than 25 miles an hour, that they would be crushed by the weight of them moving that fast, because the fastest horses ran about 24.7 miles an hour, and they figured that they would be crushed if they went faster. And that was literally a lot of people's contention, and they didn't want vehicles and cars because they didn't want to go that fast because they were afraid they were going to die. My point of all this is that the uneducated don't realize, and then you have people that are not wanting an industry to be something, and they're telling people lies, or allowing them to have fears about something that is just untrue. And I believe that the pyramidal complex around the world, in the step pyramids around the world, were not built for what they think it was built for. It was not built by who they thought it was built for, because they always say aliens. And we didn't have any of the need for that, to be taught that from them, because there was geniuses at the time. And I think Stephen Myers is on to a more plausible ideology as to why the pyramid was built, when and how, because it could be done. They could actually do it and show people, because they've done it when they created the lock system that we have at just those two canals, Erie and the Panama Canal. And how did they, when they were building the lock system, did they use the lock system to build the lock system? They had to have, huh?
I think so. I think that everything they did was the height of efficiency. So they would build the water locks from the Nile River all the way up to the building site.
Yeah.
But each time they got a lock completed, they could use that to bring up the materials
For the next
up
level.
to the point of construction on that series of water locks. So yeah, everything about the Great Pyramid, its construction was the height of efficiency, production line efficiencies, not strong back muscles or anything like that. So it was a marvelous task built by geniuses that had a big construction project with a big return on investment.
Right, and it worked.
Everything is that way.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Even the Notre Dame, they built Notre Dame, and it's beautiful and it's a wonderful building, and people have gone in there and worshiped, and people have gone in there for 800 years and tithed. So
think about that. Until they burned it down a few years ago. Now they're rebuilding it.
Yeah. But the point is, it had a huge return on investment.
Think about that. 800 years people were going in there, and you don't think that they were just not, people were paying money.
They were tithing.
Nothing else, a donation.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's incredible. So anyway, so for the builders, there was a huge return on investment. What about that pyramid in Las Vegas? Luxor, I've been there.
Luxor, I've never been there, but I've seen pictures of it.
Yeah. Well, what's it for? And
right.
people say, well, people can go in and gamble. I said, well, for the people that built it, it's a huge construction project, but it provides a huge, even bigger return on investment. Oh, I guess you could look at it that way. The people that built it, their kids get to go to college because their college education is funded by those people with running the slot machines. So there's a huge return on investment.
No, and that's the truth. That you have to look at, guys, like I said earlier, you have to look at the motivation. What would motivate people to build something like that? And and everyone's like, well, the Pharaoh was so rich, he just decided to have people build this entire thing that he never used, and then it just sat there. No, there had to be another reason for it. People don't build things and spend a ton of money just to do that. When even rich people, they still want everybody to know they have it. So if a rich person builds a $5 million home, they're going to want to have somebody come in and film that $5 million home, because they need people to know they have that status. And they would be something. It's still a tourist industry. Now it's still, they're making money off of it. They do that. I mean, look at Kanye West was selling T-shirts, tie-dye T-shirts that were whatever they were, $50,000 or $5,000.
Yeah.
And people were buying that, but why? Because he was a brand and he was able to get people to buy it. And he's still not doing it because people got wise and said, why would I spend that much money on a T-shirt that I can make for a nickel? But the point is, but the point is, literally, money is the motivating factor, or prosperity is the motivating factor. And literally sometimes things, and because what would be the purpose of aliens building the pyramid? Because we were just telling you we were here. You could have left a piece of paper, could have left us a note, could have texted.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Or people say, well, they built the Great Pyramid so it can point to stars. You could have just, built a rock arrow that pointed up to a star or something. You didn't have to.
Right. Truly. Or drew pictures like the Nazca lines, draw pictures on the ground for us to see and go, oh, yeah. Right. They could have left a tablet, a stone tablet that they carved words in.
Yeah.
We were here. We were here, whatever my alien name is, I was from. Why is it that there's never anything? All these aliens came down. Let's go to that. All these aliens came down here to Earth, and they did all these fabulous things, and none of them took credit by saying, I was here and I came from there, and this is when I got here. But when we go over to places like that guy did just a few months ago, when he went over to the Colosseum in Rome, he's over there carving his fucking name, pardon my American, in the side of this 2,000-year-old thing, which I hope they put him in jail for. But my point is, he was like, Unfufu, Yehudi was here. Why do you think these aliens would come down from, wherever in the universe, and they land down here and they never leave anything behind to take credit except for these esoteric buildings that may or may not be telling you a message? If I went to another culture and I wanted to become a god and want everybody to worship me, I'm going to build a freaking statue of myself and I'm going to carve my name everywhere. And I'm going to give you the whole history of how I got here and who I was. None of that exists. Right.
Yeah.
But yet we're supposed to believe that certain things were built by aliens and that it wasn't just smart humans, because we were all had to be stupid, and only us now with our technology that we have currently are the smartest people in the history of the universe. And I would suggest that because we can't figure out why these different complexes around the world were built, we're the stupidest ones, not the smartest ones.
That's true. That was common knowledge on how it was built. People watched it being built. The people that built it knew how it was built and knew why they were doing it.
Yep.
And we're the ones that know less than what just the common people knew at that time. So,
agreed.
It's a strange world. And again, we're in a revolution of ideas. Hopefully, things are going to change, and Egyptology will lose its stranglehold on studying Egypt, if you will. People will acknowledge that science is stagnated and, doesn't do any demonstrations. And that will help lift new ideas out of obscurity and into the public eye.
Well, and I agree with that. I agree that things are going to change. I know that I'm part of this movement that is planning to make changes, just as you are, trying to make changes to the perception of knowledge on this planet, to show people that there's a reason that they're trying to eradicate history, because they don't want us to look at it, because they have a narrative that they want to teach us, and it has nothing to do with us investigating these buildings all around the world to discover how they were actually made. Just shut up, don't look there, and just believe what I tell you is how they were made, because we're the smartest people in the world, and just listen to what I tell you and believe me, because I'll tell you so. And by the way, give us money so that we'll tell you our theory of how this was done, and not the truth about any of this stuff around the world. Otherwise, there'd be no reason for them to try and not allow people to learn history, and that's what they're doing all over the place.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of suppression of new discoveries, of interpretations of evidence that the powers that be don't want us to know about. So, but slowly, there's a chink in their armor, and then some of it is revealed, which leads to more truth. And it's always been that way.
Yep, the truth shall set you free, right? That comes right out of, isn't that in one of the Bibles somewhere?
I've heard that.
Yeah, I've heard that, but it's true. I mean, the honesty is that telling truth cannot be denied. You have to lie about it, or you have to use certain words. I talk about this in my up and coming book. You have to use certain words like coincidence, anecdotal. No, there is no definitive proof.
Mm-hmm.
Because the word, I saw a video from someone who talked about coincidence. That's one of those words that you can't prove or disprove, because by its very nature, it is saying that whatever it's talking about can't be proved or disproved. That's a coincidence. So the word itself can't be proven. You can't prove something is a coincidence, because the word coincidence means there is no correlation. So when you break down the etymology of all of these words that they use, none of them, they're all meaningless. And it works both ways. It's a coincidence that you say that's a coincidence. Done. It's done. Right?
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. So, but we'll see. We'll see how things progress and that type of
Well, if
thing.
we have
So,
our way, you and I, and our thought processes, we will get the truth out to the world about the things that we're trying to teach them. And I believe that if we teach people just one thing, that is to investigate it yourself, learn, read, and figure things out, and don't just listen. I tell people on my show all the time, don't believe a word I've said to you. Go out and look it all up for yourself. Go down that road. I tell you this about Stephen's new book. Don't believe a word he says. Buy his book and research his book and read his book, and then go to thepump.org and look at everything that they have there. And then don't believe a word they say, and go and research that for yourself to see if what they're saying has any weight whatsoever. Because I think what's going to happen is you're going to go down that rabbit hole. And I tell people that, I say, if you can prove that what I've said is completely false, I'll have you on my show to talk about it. And I've been doing this for 7 years. And do you know, not one person called me up and said, I got you, and I'm going to prove it. Because when you go down that rabbit hole, you're going to find you're going to start asking the same questions that Stephen's been asking. And then you're going to start finding the same answers that he's been answering. And eventually you're going to go, you know, that guy's got something going on there. He might be telling the truth, and it might be accurate. So I say to you again, don't believe a word I've said. Don't believe a word Stephen has said. Buy his book, read his book, go in there and I would love to go to Egypt and investigate myself. Figure this stuff out, because when knowledge is the key to the universe. Knowledge is the key to the universe. Learning is the key to the universe. Our past and history is the key to the universe, because I believe, Stephen believes, if you look back in time, the people that were there were a lot smarter than we give them credit for. And if we can get into their heads and figure out what they were doing, we can change the face of the world. Am I right?
that's true. I appreciate that. I've met a lot of researchers on Facebook researchers, and what book are you reading? Oh, I watched Ancient Aliens on TV, or that type of thing. So the
Right.
burden of
I don't watch
responsibility.
that show anymore. I don't even deal. I own that platform. I created Ancient Aliens Worldwide in 2012. I don't have anything to do with it right now.
Yeah,
I still own it, but there's a group of people that are volunteers that run it, and it's there for
yeah,
people to learn. But if you go there, you're not going to hear that same narrative.
yeah,
They're talking about actual research and possibility of aliens, but you're not going to see that narrative, even though all the guys from the show are in that group or on there talking sometimes and posting.
yeah.
You're not going to see that. That's not our agenda. Our agenda is to actually get you to research real ideology and to see if in your mind's eye we're trying to open your mind to the possibilities. History is the same way, and I don't look at the pyramids lightly. I don't say they were built by aliens. Anything's possible, but it's more plausible, honestly. And really quickly, let's go into this. We talked about this for a quick minute. And Stephen pointed out, rightly so, brilliant minds, Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla never, ever once in his entire life said, oh, and the pyramidal complexes in Egypt have some correlation with the stars or aliens. And he was one that might have inferred that he got some of his information from maybe not celestial, but I've seen the same thing with von Braun. They never said the word aliens. They always talked about, and I believe they were talking about getting information from the cosmos more than, and that would be a god or whatever you want to call that godhead, than them saying, because they never said, oh, it was a little green man from Mars, or aliens came down physically and gave me this information. Nikola Tesla never talked about any correlation in mathematics or otherwise that had to do with the pyramids. Am I right?
That's right. He never said the word pyramid in any of his writings. The word pyramid is never in any of his patents and in any of his speeches or correspondence. He never said the word pyramid. People compare the Tesla Tower with the Great Pyramid, and they have idiotic memes that say that they look alike or whatever. Something
Right.
looks like something else, so they're related, and
Right.
they're quite a bit different. The Tesla
Yes.
Tower and the Great Pyramid, but they they come up with some bizarre notions. So then you mentioned to somebody, hey, Tesla never talked about the Great Pyramid or any pyramids, didn't compare his tower to
Right.
pyramids. And then they'll say, oh, well, you're wrong. Look at this. And then they send a link to some clickbait article that rehashes the same modern urban myth, but doesn't have any references. Isn't that
Right.
interesting?
Right.
Doesn't have any
So
references
you
at
would have
all.
to really seriously pay attention to that, guys, because if that were true, that the Tesla coil was proof that the pyramid was the same way, you would think that Nikola Tesla would have realized that and said, "Hey, check this out," right?
Yeah.
This is what the pyramid, but there was never any mention to that at all. Why?
Yeah, that's just a
Because,
modern urban myth. Instead of comparing the Great Pyramid with, the Bible and making up a bunch of correlations, they just compared the Great Pyramid with the Tesla Tower and say, "Oh, there you have it." Shazam! It's right there.
right,
But it doesn't withstand the rigors of the scientific method. It's
right,
hokum,
yeah,
modern day urban myth.
yeah,
And modern day urban myths are detrimental to seeking the truth. And
yeah,
if
agreed.
you're a researcher, the burden of responsibility of conducting research rests on your own shoulders. And if you're a researcher, a really good idea is to understand valid research methods
Yes,
and also to love truth. But I've met a lot of researchers that aren't very fond of truth at all. They just like
yeah,
whatever somebody came up with,
yeah.
and that
Well,
too.
and it's money. Yeah, you have to. Yeah, you seriously have to be open minded and honest when you're doing research. I've had people say that to me. Well, what makes you think you should be able to create and run ancient aliens worldwide? Because I have been searching for extraterrestrial evidence since I was like 8 years old, and I was part of think tanks. And that, in fact, Ancient Aliens Worldwide was a think tank before it went public. And we literally did actual research, and we don't try to prove that there are aliens or ever have been. We try to disprove, because that's what you do in science. You find an idea and then you try to say, how can I disprove this and make it so that I can prove that it's not valid? And
Right.
that's how you validate something, is when you can't unprove it, then you go, maybe it's compelling and it is something. So I say about Stephen's idea of the water pump, I challenge you guys out there, disprove it. Because you're going to find that when you go down that path to try and disprove it, because Stephen he didn't just think this up. He's been figuring this out and researching this for over 20 years of his life. Okay, so he didn't come up with this idea and run with it and just go, yeah, I think it was just a pump, man. And it wasn't like yesterday. He's written 3 books and he spent time looking this stuff up and researching this. And he still thinks, you know what? I still think that they built the pyramids with water locks and that it was a water pump to feed their people, and that it was a giant return on investment that kept those people alive and their history to this day, even though it doesn't work anymore because technology improved to where they didn't need the pyramid anymore and they stopped using it. And then somewhere along the line, they forgot, on purpose or on accident, forgot what it was used for and built. Am I right?
That's true. The Great Pyramid could have been built before the last catastrophe, back when the Sphinx was built, according to Dr. Robert Schoch, and then there was some sort of a catastrophe, and then they lost the understanding of that high technology. So, or it could have also broke in the interior. So either way.
Well, and if you look, they've proven now, the guys, Stephen and Evan Strong, when they started their out of Australia theory and they started looking at DNA around the world, they realized that at certain times in the world, and they've proved this, there have been different catastrophes that has decimated the population of the earth, eradicating and erasing all of the memory, or most of the memory, of certain regions of the world, and we would rediscover these places and not know why they were built. And if you don't believe that, I give you everything in South America in the last 200 years.
Yeah.
Right? As proof. We have no idea when. We didn't even know they were there until somebody said, there's this big giant city back here in the jungle that we found 20 years ago that we know about. Well, what is it? We don't know. We just know that people lived there a long, long time ago. And then the outside world showed up and started clearing away the brush. And then the countries that own them started clearing away the brush and charging money for people to come there and try and figure it out. And even they aren't exactly sure what they were for, because something happened at a certain time, and all of the memory of that by the people who live there currently is gone, and no one knows why. And that happens all around the world. And we know that because there's these places that we call, wonders of the world. And we go there and everyone's trying to figure out how they got there because we don't have the memory of it anymore. Well, what happened? How come we don't? Well, there was some catastrophe that happened. So it's very possible the pyramid's older than they think, and that there was something happening and it broke, or it's just so old that it doesn't work anymore because of climate changes, and something happened at a certain time in history. And you can go back and look at that, and the people forgot what it was for. And then they started making up stories.
True. So there's a lot of gaps in understanding the history of humans. And it's like a puzzle with many of the pieces missing. So I'm just trying to do my just little share of discovery through understanding how and why the Great Pyramid was built, instead of worrying about what type of hat the Pharaoh wore, or how they made mummies or whatever.
Right. And a lot of what they were doing was symbolic. I talk about that in my new book. When I get that out there for you guys to see, I talk about that because a lot of what they are showing and telling you in many cultures isn't depicting what they're claiming. Like Stephen was saying, with a certain hat with the snake on it and why that's there, or the Eye of Horus and what that correlates to and what that means. And it must have some religious thing, and it has to do with this or that, or none of that, and it has to do with a headset or a headdress. And when you go back far enough, you find there's a different set of ideas as to why these things were there for people to see, that they were trying to tell you and show you that they're completely trying to steer you away from today. And there's a reason for that. All of our history is that way. And they're trying to steer you in a way that has nothing to do with what it was actually for or why. And you have to ask, what would be their motivation to do that? It comes back to the same thing. Stephen talked about it throughout the entire thing. It comes back to right now they're making money off of telling you a different narrative than what's the truth. And they're not going to change their story until people like Stephen chink at their armor long enough to where people are going to go, oh, well, then there's this guy, Mr. Myers, who's got this idea. Oops. And that kind of is what's going to happen going forward. Am I right? I hope anyway.
Right.
I bet you do.
Yeah, that's right. There's no doubt about that. And there's a lot of different things out there going on, political, geopolitical, about energy systems and transfer of funding, on a geopolitical basis.
Yep.
That type of thing is going on. But we're trying to redevelop this self-sufficient and energy efficient, non-polluting water pumping technology that we think ancient mankind developed, but we want to develop it now for an alternative to hydroelectricity or fossil fuel generated electricity.
Right? Because it's renewable, it's sustainable, and you're using the environment instead of working against it. You're not using technology. You're not blowing something up, burning something, creating pollution into the air. And I think Stephen thinks this, I know Stephen thinks this, that they were far more efficient in the past. And if you think about the technology that they used for this pump to utilize this, it was all earth-based, meaning It was not motors. It was not diesel engines. It was not, even hydroelectric is a better option than, say, a nuclear power plant. Because at least that one is just water flowing through and generating electricity to be used instead of us purposely splitting the atom and trying to contain it. And if we don't, we radiate everybody and kill everybody in the area. So going forward, this idea from these ancient Egyptians, like Stephen was just saying, they're literally trying to figure out how to put this into action today sustainably to create or recreate technology that was utilized in the past for green energy today. Am I right?
That's right. So, funding's been difficult. It's for some, it's a hard sell, but it'd be nice to have an angel investor type of thing. But we are making strides in developing this technology that's kind of related to Victor Schauberger's idea of water's property of implosion.
Yes.
Is certainly part of what we're doing, and electrolysis as well in the Grand Gallery. So it's there's a lot to it, and hopefully people can read the information in my books. It's quite a body of research, I might say, if I'm not too proud to say that.
Right.
So, and I know that people have questions in their mind. Well, how did they do all this? What all happened? Why are the passages and chambers like they are? Well, that's what my books are about, is questions like that, to explain the enigmatic features of the Great Pyramid and give them a functional purpose.
Right. And you know what? You have to research these things and look into the truth that is that the future for our civilization is not going to be sustainable unless we start making resources that are sustainable and alternatives. And Albert Einstein said it perfectly when he said, we cannot solve the problems that we created with the same thinking that got us into that problem. Okay.
Right.
And so my point is, and Stephen's point is, the technology that we're using currently is, the cost of that is destroying our environment and destroying our people. And we're finding that out. So there's a lot of people out there that are fighting against it because they want to keep this. But then there's a lot of people that are fighting to try and change things to go from, say, fossil fuels to electricity, but they're not building the proper grid that can handle all of their problems. So they're creating a new problem that's a short-term solution that's going to create a problem faster and get us into a deeper hole than where we're at. Do I think that electricity is the way to go? Yeah, but I don't think that the way we're going at it right now is the current way to fix things. I think we need sustainable, renewable energy sources, but we also need to look at better ways of creating them. And I think that this water, the pump.org is a place to start for one idea of something that has been researched for a long time by Stephen, that they believe that they can manufacture again and give us energy at a lower cost in a natural way that doesn't harm the environment. And I don't think that Stephen knew I was going to go down this road with where we were going to go, but this was my plan from the beginning. So you guys might want to take a look at what he's doing and what they're doing there, and get the word out to people. Like he said, that they could use some help in funding because they have opposition. And the reason they have opposition is because no one wants them to succeed, because they like things the way they are as status quo, and they don't want change. So history is trying to be hidden from you, because there's a lot about history that they were doing that was natural and didn't cause problems to the environment. And that's just not the way things are. For instance, today, really quickly, and then I'll let Stephen have the last word. Today, I reposted a post showing that hemp and the benefits of hemp, not because of a psychedelic effect of smoking it or eating it or drinking it, but what it does for the environment. And it literally shows that it gives off 20 times more oxygen in a 4-month time period than a tree does. It takes that tree more than 20 years to give off that amount of oxygen. And there's other benefits that we could use hemp for paper and clothing and things like that are far less stringent to our entire ecosystem than the current way we're using it, but nobody wants to change that way because they're making money off of the way that it is. And that's what Steven's up against with his research and them looking at this pump. So I don't think he realized I was kind of going to go down that road because I didn't tell him that. But this is a thing that people need to look into, not just because we got to figure out how the pyramid was, but because if what they're saying is plausible, we can use that technology now. And that's what they're doing at thepump.org. So you should go in there and take a look. So you get the last word, my friend, and then we probably should go because it's been a couple hours. Right?
All right. Well, I appreciate all the kind words, and I think you have a finger on the pulse of what my research is all about and the direction of research.
Right.
But hopefully this interview will elicit some questions that the viewers have, and the best way to answer those is read my books. If they're not in your local library, you can interlibrary loan them or get them on Kindle. It's cheaper, and find out what it's about, and then you can contact us at the website, thepump.org, and then also ask us a question if you want, become involved, or whatever. So I appreciate people listening to this type of a interview, and I again thank you very much, Leonard, for having me on your show.
Thank you for being on here. We had a really good conversation, and guys, listen to what Steven's saying. Research, go to his websites, take a look at his books, and get involved. Find a way to get involved wherever you are in the world at a grassroots level, because that's going to be how things are going to change, is by, like Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. If we make the change slowly, things change over time. If you were to go back in time 20 years and ask Stephen Myers what it would think about what he was talking about and where it would be in 20 years, he would have probably said to you, I got such an uphill battle, no one's going to probably listen to anything that I say. Yet, he's still around. Yet, he has 3 books. Yet, people are starting to listen. But it's taken him 20 years to get people to do so. And I just said to you that the idea about some things in our universe being possibly AI was crazy for all of time. And even 40 years ago, when a few scientists started talking about it, and now come forward 40 years in time, and here we have scientists going, you know what? That's weird, because some of our stuff we're finding out here in outer space and our reality is a lot like this computer program that we have written in a weird way that scares us, because they're starting to realize that, wait a minute, there's something weird going on, and it may not be what we all thought. And I think that's the way history is. And I think that you guys should take a look at Stephen's book and read his book, because I believe that even if you don't believe that and think that aliens built it, they came up with this pump idea that could work and would work applied in an efficient way. So even if you want to say these crazy aliens built the pyramid, take a look at the pump and take a look at the idea of that technology and how that could work around the world, and how people are kind of getting onto that now and kind of stealing the ideas without giving credit to Stephen about that stuff. And they'll probably never say, well, I went to the pump.org and read and watched his documentaries and kind of got the idea and ran with it. I don't think Stephen would complain about that, but it would be nice to have a little bit of credit. So go to his website, guys, and take a look. Buy his book, take a look. And you know what? Just keep at it, brother. And we'll have more talks in the future, because I have plans to start doing things with a bunch of people that were working in the background. So don't be surprised if I contact you and say, hey, we're planning to go to Egypt. You want to come and we'll do a whole thing and film it? And, so don't be surprised if that happens in the next couple of years, my friend. We believe that guys like Stephen and myself now are going to change the face of the world. And the only way we're going to do that is by talking to all you guys out there and getting you to look into it yourselves. and research it. And once you do, you're going to want to make changes. And then what are you going to do? You're going to, well, these guys are already got ideas. Maybe we should talk to these guys and see what they have to say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend. Everybody out there, I'm going to put it up on the screen one more time before I go. Okay. Let me put it up on the screen one more time. Go to thepump.org and take a look at what's going on, the research that they have there, and get involved if you can. All right, guys, have a great day. I love you guys. I'll see you guys on Friday for the Law of One, where we talk about spirituality once again and the Law of One. All right, guys, have a good day.
Bye.